Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Licensing Options for Cannabis Companies. So we're excited to be joined with Nick Agrippino, who is a tax manager at Bowers & Company. Again, my name is Brian Benura. I'm the Director of Member Engagement here at Center State CEO. So Center State CEO, some of you may not know, we're the region's business leadership organization and Chamber of Commerce. We have a very simple mission, and that's to create a place where businesses thrive and people prosper, right? And it's important we talk about both and having a robust economy where businesses can operate competitively, but also creating that community where people of all races have an opportunity to participate in the economy. At Center State CEO, our lines of businesses consist of membership, which is within business and economic development, economic inclusion, racial equity and social impact, research, policy and planning, and the tech garden. So if you have any questions on Center State CEO, please feel free to reach out to myself or Jessica Underwood. So again, I'm going to be happy to be joined by Nick Agrippino of Bowers & Company. Nick is the tax manager at Bowers & Company, full service accounting firm based in Syracuse, New York. Nick has direct experience working in the cannabis industry with existing registered organizations, and he's now overseeing the newly launched cannabis niche at Bowers. So today we're going to learn about the variety of licenses that a cannabis business in New York State can attain. Nick will present on the licenses that allow businesses to take part in different activities within the supply chain, as well as explain different licensing options that businesses can apply for. So Nick, I'm going to pass the presentation over to you.
Awesome. Good morning. Thank you for having me present today on such an important topic. Since there's a lot I want to cover in a short period of time, we're going to just go ahead and get right into it. Can we get the next slide? Perfect. So brief overview of the objectives. We're going to go over the overview of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. We're going to go over the adult use license types and some of the nuances of each of those. Then we'll get into application guidelines and fundamentals. And then we'll briefly touch on taxation issues under the MRTA. Before we get started into the content, standard caveat, today's presentation is based on the text of the MRTA as we understand it today. The Cannabis Control Board hasn't issued regulations yet. So really everything in this presentation is subject to change, but just based on how we understand it today. All right, so let's start with the intent and spirit of the MRTA. The intent and spirit is to promote social equity and create an anti-monopolistic marketplace. The goal is for 50% of adult use licenses to be awarded to social equity applicants. The law prohibits vertical integration, which is basically, you control the process from seed to eventual sale, except if you're a registered organization or a micro business, which we'll get into what those mean later. The overall goal of the equity plan is to promote diversity in commerce, ownership, and employment, and also to provide opportunities for social and economic equity. Before we get into the details of the licenses and process, it's important to understand who's going to be overseeing the program. So first, you have the Cannabis Control Board. The bill established a 5-member control board that's yet to be appointed. So this is going to be an executive director of the board, and both the 5-member control board and the executive director are going to be appointed by the governor, subject to Senate and Assembly consent. The governor is going to appoint 3 board members, the Senate president, and the Assembly speaker. Each is going to serve a term of 3 years, and the members must be geographically and demographically representative of the state and communities historically affected by the war on drugs. The Cannabis Advisory Board is going to work in collaboration with the Cannabis Control Board to issue recommendations on the use of cannabis, cannabinoid hemp, and hemp extract. The advisory board is going to consist of 13 members, each serving 3-year terms. 7 of those are going to be appointed by the governor, 3 of those by the Senate president, and 3 of those by the Assembly speaker. So as I stated, the regulations haven't been released yet, but I get a lot of questions as far as timeline goes, when all this is going to happen. So the MRTA does not have clear deadlines for the publication of the final rules for acceptance of applications. But currently in place is, once the board is fully established, the current medical cannabis law is automatically repealed 6 months from now, which suggests that new regulations are expected within that time period. So as far as, when marijuana will be first offered in New York State, we have a couple hints. Senator Liz Kruger, 2 months ago, she said that most likely it will be within 18 months. So, we're talking still 16 months from now. Also, Assemblywoman People-Stokes thinks that sales could start within a year. And the tax provision of the adult use cannabis sales do not become effective until April 2022. So definitely not before then. The MRTA also requires the Cannabis Control Board to deliver its first annual report by January 1st, 2023. So that's kind of hints that, we're expecting sales sometime in 2022, but probably the later. For home grow, this is 18 months after the first adult use sales in New York State happen in a dispensary. So, you're talking probably 2.5 to 3 years before any of that happens. So let's get into the social equity priority a little bit. The board is going to develop a social equity plan to actively promote social equity applicants and create gender, racial, and ethnic diversity in the marketplace. There's some different categories of what's considered a social equity applicant, which is broken up into 4 groups defined by the law. The first is communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. The second is who qualifies as a minority or woman-owned business. Third category is distressed farmers. And the fourth is service disabled veterans. So these groups are defined by the bill, but the bill also says that qualifications for these shall be determined by the board in the regulations. So let's break down these categories a little bit. What constitutes a woman or minority owned business? This is a business that is at least 51% owned by US citizens or permanent residents. The business must qualify as a small business, so less than 100 employees. And equity applicants will have to demonstrate that the woman or minority ownership is real, substantial, and continuing, with the equity applicant having and exercising authority to independently control day-to-day business decisions. So in other words, you actually have to be an owner involved in the business, not just on paper. A distressed farmer, the definition of this is filed a Schedule F, which is the tax form, that farm businesses file, and had receipts in the last 3 years, qualify as for an agricultural assessment, and has been disproportionately impacted, including but not limited to incurring operating losses, low commodity prices, and faces the loss of farmland through development of suburban sprawl, and meets any other qualifications as defined in regulation by the board. So a big thing that comes to mind is, hemp farmers have been struggling a lot in the agricultural market. So that's definitely a big target for that. Also, the business has to be owned by New York State residents or a New York entity that's established in New York, and meet the definition of a small farm, which is gross cash farm income less than 350K. And if you're a small farm, less than 150K. All right, so, and then the bill also calls for extra priority to be given to certain applicants. So extra priority is going to be given to applicants from communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, has an income lower than 80% of the median income in the county in which the applicant resides, or convicted personally, or had a direct relative convicted of a marijuana offense. The bill also calls for extra assistance to be given to social equity applicants. The CCB is going to, we don't have many details of how this is going to work, but in the bill, the CCB is going to establish an incubator program, which is going to be designed to encourage equity applicants to apply for a license. And if licensed, will provide direct support in the form of counseling services, education, small business coaching and financial planning, and compliance assistance. There's also going to be a loan program set up by the Office of Cannabis Management and or the Urban Development Corporation that's going to issue low interest or interest-free loans to equity applicants. There's also, again, we don't have this right now, but there's language that suggests that equity applicants could also have waived or even reduced fees during the license process. All right, so let's get in a little bit to the fundamentals and the nuances in the application process. Currently, we don't know the number of licenses that are going to be given out. The Cannabis Advisory Board will recommend to the board the number of licenses required to ensure a competitive market and actively promote social and economic equity applicants. So there's no hard caps right now on number of licenses, but the board is going to analyze the number in different classes of license and the character of licenses in proximity to the location, in any particular municipality. So in other words, they're likely going to want to spread out, to hit all the markets throughout New York State. If licensed, the initial license is going to be good for 2 years. Again, we also don't know the license fees right now. The MRTA provides that license fees may be based on cultivation and or production volume. So there could be like a sliding scale for license fees, kind of depending on what the size of the operation that you want to do. Again, social equity applicants could also have fees reduced or waived. There's a de facto residency requirement for applying for a medical license, adult use license, or cannabinoid hemp license or permit. So you have to have a significant presence in New York State, either individually or having a principal corporate office located in the state. So you also have to be incorporated or otherwise organized under the laws of the state, or a majority of your ownership have to be residents. All right, some of the information that's going to be sought during the application process is going to be the application's racial and ethnic identity, the ownership and investment information of the applicant, corporate structure and financial statements, evidence of good moral character, and information about the premises is to be licensed. So let's get into the selection criteria a little bit. The board's going to develop regulations for application criteria for the initial round of licenses. So this is what we have right now, but it's not limited to. The board could establish more criteria, whether the applicant qualifies as a social or economic equity applicant. If it's not a social equity applicant, if the applicant has a plan for benefiting communities that have been disproportionately impacted by enforcement of cannabis laws, the ability to control illegal diversion or inversion of cannabis, compliance with all applicable state laws and regulations, capacity to properly carry out the license activities. So, kind of going back to the incubator program, if there's going to be some assistance with that, we just don't know the details fully yet. If you're a non-social equity applicant, you are going to need to show the right to use sufficient lands, building, and equipment to properly carry out the activities that you're describing in your applications. Social equity applicants just need to have a plan in order to do so. The board is also going to consider what's called public interest factors. This is impact of licenses on the economic market for cannabis, impact on labor organizations. There's a requirement for a labor peace agreement, contributions to communities disproportionately impacted by cannabis law enforcement through social responsibility framework, the likelihood of becoming a public nuisance, so maybe traffic and noise impacts, the ability to increase climate resiliency and limit environmental impacts, and for processors and cultivators, consideration of environmental and energy impacts in their operations. There is what's called an effective union mandate. As I stated just briefly ago, labor peace agreements are required. This is defined under law as an agreement that protects the state's proprietary interest by prohibiting labor organizations and members from engaging in picketing, work stoppages, boycotts, and any other economic interference with the entity. So applicants must demonstrate that they have entered into a labor peace agreement. This is a ongoing material conditional licensure and eventual reapplication, once that first 2 years is up. The board is also going to take into account whether or not the applicant has a project labor agreement in place, if they have over 25 employees. So the office is going to look at it if applicants have entered into agreement with a statewide or local building and construction trade organization for construction work on its licensed facilities. So let's get into the municipal oversight more at the local level. All right, so I'm sure you've heard in the news a lot about municipalities opting out. So municipalities are going to have to opt out by December 31st, but they can only opt out of retail dispensaries and on-site consumption licenses. Municipalities can later opt back in if they choose to opt out, but once they opt out, if it's not done by December 31st of this year, they can never opt out after that. Municipalities at the local level will be able to pass reasonable time, place, and manner rules for adult use dispensaries and on-site consumption licenses, but ROs won't be, registered organizations won't be impacted by this. If a municipality does decide to opt out, this prevents them from collecting any of the tax revenue that we'll get into a little bit later. So during the licensing process, applicants are going to have to notify a municipality. If this only applies to dispensary and on-site consumption lounges, between 270 and 30 days before the application submission. So you have to apply notice. So a municipality is going to be able to take a position on the applicant for or against. So this doesn't necessarily mean that opinion is going to hold any water, but the CCB is going to take it into account and it's going to be part of the record. So the OCM is going to perform the initial evaluation of every applicant and submit its recommendations to the Cannabis Control Board. If the Cannabis Control Board isn't satisfied with an application, the executive director is required to notify the applicant of the specific reasons for the denial. An administrative appeal process hasn't been released yet, but the law has some general provisions that contemplate that a denied applicant will be able to appeal in some form. All right, some business considerations that I get asked about a lot. License amendment, transfer, signability. Upon application before the board, a license may be amended to allow a license to relocate within the state, add or delete activities or facilities, or to amend ownership or organizational structure of the entity. But any kind of change like that is most likely going to have to be approved by the board. But we don't know if there's any kind of, small changes that the board is just going to automatically accept. So if you're a social equity applicant, your license is non-transferable for a 3-year period unless it's to another social equity applicant. But again, that's subject to the approval by the Cannabis Control Board. If there's any outstanding loans by the CCB or the urban development, it's kind of thought that those are probably going to have to be paid back if the license is transferred. Non-social equity applicants will be able to transfer licenses within the first 2 years, but this hasn't been approved yet. So there's a chance that non-social equity applicants, they might be very tough on, transferring those, because I think the goal with that is to kind of create a more stable marketplace instead of these pay-to-play markets that we've seen in other states, where people are stacking licenses and just eventually handing them off to someone else by sale. So I think this is ultimately, going to kind of weed out the truly committed applicants that are in it for the long haul and, actually want to participate in the market for a long period of time. Once you have a license, you won't be able to pledge it as collateral for any kind of loan. All right, so at the top, you'll see, registered organizations. So these are businesses currently involved in the medical program or yet to be involved. Today, we're going to be focusing mostly on the adult use only license types down below. So let's get right into there and start with the cultivator license. This is going to permit the acquisition, possession, distribution, cultivation, and sale of cannabis to licensed processors. The activities of this include growing, cloning, harvesting, drying, curing, grading, and trimming cannabis. Some of the limitations with this license is you can apply for up to one processor license and one distributor license to attach to this cultivator license. But these are only going to be solely for your own products. There's also, again, we'll get into these different types of licenses as we go on, but they'll also be able to apply for up to one nursery license. Cultivators will be able to only have interest in one cultivator license, but you'll be able to potentially have more than one location, but that's going to be pursuant to a criteria established by the board. If you own a cultivator and a processor license, they're going to have to be located on the same premise. If you have a cultivator license, you won't be able to hold any interest in a retail license. And like I said, you can only have one cultivator license. Some of the unknowns with this right now is indoor versus outdoor limitations. We don't even know right now if you're going to allow outdoor. I know that there's a lot of push to allow that. And as far as that goes, we don't know if there's going to be any kind of like cap as far as acreage or square footage goes, of what a cultivator can do under one license. And then the CCB, there's language in the bill that suggests that you might be able to do a limited amount of processing without a processor license, but we don't know what those limits are just yet. And that kind of moves us into our next license, which is the processor license. This is going to permit the acquisition, possession, processing, and sale of cannabis between cultivators and processors. Activities covered include blending, extracting, infusing, packaging, labeling, branding, and otherwise preparing cannabis products for final sale. Some of the limitations with this is you can hold a distributor license, but that is only for your own products and not the distribution of other license holders. And you cannot hold a direct or indirect interest in any retail dispensaries. Same thing as with the cultivator license, you can only hold one adult use processor license. And same thing as the cultivator license, you'll be able to have more than one location, but that's pursuant to criteria established by the board in the regulations that haven't been released yet. Cooperative license, this is pretty much a combination of a cultivator, processor, and distributor license. A cooperative is subject to certain requirements, but some of the big ones are, all of the owners have to be New York residents as an LLC or LLP, and be democratically controlled as a one-to-one vote cooperative. The main limitation with this is cooperative members can't be members in more than one cooperative. You're just limited to one. Moving on to the distributor license. This is going to authorize the acquisition, possession, distribution, and sale of cannabis from the licensed premises to retail dispensaries or on-site consumption lounges. So basically moving product from point A to point B, just how it sounds. You won't be able to have an interest in any micro business, dispensary, or on-site consumption license, or any registered organization either. Any distributor with an interest in a cultivator or processor license is only going to be able to distribute their own products, cultivated and processed. Nothing at this time suggests that if you're only handling the distribution side of things, that you can't have more than one distributor license, but that's assuming that that's the only piece of the puzzle that you control. Retail dispensary license. This is going to authorize the acquisition, possession, sale, and delivery of cannabis from the licensed premises of the retail dispensary to ultimate consumers. If you hold a retail dispensary license, this is the only license you're going to be able to have an interest in. You're limited to up to 3 adult use retail dispensary licenses. Some of the, kind of get into the zoning a little bit. The locations can't be within 500 feet of a school or within 200 feet of a house of worship. And the store is going to be located at a street level entrance. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, that you're going to have to demonstrate ownership or possession of the premises licensed within 30 days of a final approval. So you're going to need to have some kind of lease agreement or, even a contingent lease agreement. And that's going to have to be as long as the initial license period. So at least that 2 years. So kind of an issue with this is, social equity applicants only have to have a plan in place to establish real estate. But New York State's really going to have to, set the program up right for the incubator program to kind of have like a step process, because it's going to be near impossible, if a social equity applicant is kind of pre-approved to be able to establish ownership of that real estate within 30 days. So hopefully there'll be some kind of staggering where, you can kind of get initial approval of those incubator programs so that you can then use those, kind of guaranteed funds to secure real estate, because, it's hard enough to secure real estate within 30 days in any case. So micro business license. So this is the only vertically integrated license allowed for adult use. This is going to authorize the cultivation, processing, distribution, and delivery and dispensing of their own products. So that's a big limitation there, where if you own this micro business license, you can control the process from start to finish, but you won't be able to sell any other businesses' products. We don't know the size, scope, and eligibility. So there's probably going to be a cap that might be on, dollar amounts of products sold, if there's going to be any square footage caps, but we don't know what those are yet and how, small those are going to be. It's the only license you'll be able to hold. And you can not only dispense, but you'll be able to, also sell your products to dispensary license holders. Delivery. It's going to authorize the delivery of cannabis by licensees independent of one another. So a limitation with this, and this is definitely geared toward the social equity provisions, you can only have up to 25 individuals working for you, and it's important individuals. So that's both employees and contractors providing full-time paid delivery services to cannabis consumers per week. An important point with this is full-time equivalents. So, just a quick example, you could have 50 employees working on average of 20 hours a week, and so it's not just a simple head count. You can only have interest in one delivery license. And if you have a dispensary license, you won't need to apply for a delivery license. That retail dispensary license is going to automatically allow you to be able to deliver to consumers. Nursery license. This is going to authorize the production, sale, and distribution of clones, immature plants, seeds, and other agricultural products used specifically for the planting and cultivation of cannabis by adult use cultivators, cooperatives, micro businesses, and ROs. As I stated earlier, if you have a cultivator license, you can apply for one nursery license, and the law is definitely very brief as far as the scope of this license. We don't know what kind of caps there are going to be with this. On-site consumption license. So basically, the bill says that New York public health laws restricting the smoking and vaping of cannabis shall not apply to adult use in on-site consumption premises. Same thing as the retail license. You're going to be able to hold interest in up to 3 of these licenses. This is the only thing that you're going to be able to be involved in if this is what you want to do. Same zoning restrictions as retail dispensary. Can't be within 500 feet of the school or 200 feet of a house of worship. The law specifically states that no one under 21 will be permitted on the premises. So that kind of tells me that, employees also have to be over 21 as well. There's some specific activities prohibited, on the same site that includes alcohol sales and gambling. And, there's some specific language in there that says anything else that the board decides. So there could be other activities that are prohibited of happening at the same place. Kind of that issue with securing real estate that I touched on earlier with the retail dispensary license. That's the same issue as far as this on-site consumption license, because you are going to need to be able to establish that real estate within 30 days of the final approval of your license. Laboratory testing license. The board's going to approve and permit 1 or more independent cannabis testing laboratories to test medical cannabis, adult use cannabis, and/or cannabinoid hemp or hemp extract. And if you hold an interest in this, you won't be able to have an interest in any other licenses. So, we're not getting into registered organizations too much. But this is definitely important to understand for the adult use market. So a registered organization is going to be able to have up to 4 dispensing sites to start. They'll also be able to have up to 4 additional medical dispensing sites. But 2 of those are going to have to be located in underserved and unserved geographic locations. So, basically you can have 8 medical sites total. So these ROs are going to also be able to apply for up to 3 adult use locations, but that's not an additional 3 locations. Those 3 locations are going to have to be where they're currently, selling medical cannabis. So, if I had to guess, that's probably going to be in high metropolitan areas and things of that. So that kind of definitely creates a big opportunity for, places like upstate to, kind of control the market up here for, smaller and medium-sized businesses. All right, so what to do now? There's a lot of things that we're waiting on right now. So these are some of the big ones. Start thinking about site selection. You're going to need to know where you want to be located down to the address of it. So, you're going to have to also sort of monitor, where, if you have an idea where you want to have anything, opting out, take a look at the municipality, see who's opting out, see who's not. If you're a minority owned business or a women business, there's a certification that you can get, and that process takes a while. I think it's usually over a year. So that doesn't disqualify you from being a woman-owned business if you're applying for that. But if you already have that certification, that's certainly going to help. Start establishing social equity partnerships, municipal relationships. This is a big one, for the reason I touched on earlier, that, they're going to have, the municipality is going to have the option to submit an opinion, with your license. So, if they definitely become engaged in local politics, if this is something that you want to do in your local municipality, because, if you notify that you want to apply for a license and, they don't even know your name, that's, start developing those relationships now with, your local town board and things. Start thinking about environmental stewardship, because that's going to help on your application. Application project management and drafting. Make a plan now, to tell what your story is and why you deserve a license. You can look at the registered organization applications. This is all public information. They're very extensive. So the hope is that it's not going to be as extensive for the adult use market. Disclosure obligations, disclosure and background checks of owners, disclosure of agreements you currently have in place that, you know, could create issues as far as, you know, conflicts of interest, submission of investment information and financial statements, and start to think about what license you want to pursue. You know, some of this is tough with things that we don't know right now, but you can at least, you know, start to think about, you know, okay, what if they do this? This is the license I can do. And then engage with the professionals, you know, attorneys, accountants, grant writers, definitely start, you know, developing those relationships now. Last but not least, let's get in a little bit about the income taxation before we get into the Q&A. So as far as sales taxes go, the bill calls for two forms of taxation. The first is a supply chain tax. This is basically when a distributor sells it to a retailer. So this is 5/10 of, so basically half a penny per milligram of the total amount of THC for flower. And this is going to be inherently tough to calculate due to THC levels differing based on different locations on the plant. Concentrates will be 0.8 of 1 cent per milligram of the total amount of THC. Edibles will be 3 cents per milligram on the total amount of THC. This is also important too, because if you're a micro business or registered organization, you almost have a little bit of an advantage here, because this tax doesn't accrue until that final sale to customers. You know, if you're, you know, if you're a distributor and selling it to a dispensary, that tax is going to accrue right when you sell it to the dispensary. So if you're a retail dispensary, you have a little bit more holding costs that you're going to have to kind of hold on to. Just a quick example, you know, if a dispensary has 50 pounds of 20% THC flower in inventory, that's $22,400 in taxes, which are ultimately going to be holding costs until you sell that product and figure it into your final sales price. This idea, I think, definitely came from, you know, the way that New York State taxes alcohol. It's sort of the same, you know, idea that taxing based on potency, you know, is calls for temperance and stuff. I don't know if I won't give an opinion on that, but that's where it came from. And really the only other state that I know of that does this is Illinois. And most other states are just a flat tax. So the second tax is a point of sale tax. This is 13% total. So 9% of this is going to go directly to the state. 4% is going to go to the local municipality. So out of that 4%, 1% is going to go to the county, and then the other 3% is going to go to your local towns and villages. So complexity with these taxes is undoubtedly going to, you know, cause mistakes for the unwary. And, you know, just to point out that, you know, penalties in New York State related to sales taxes are not very friendly, and they can rack up quickly. So it's really important to get this right. I get asked a lot how this compares to other states' taxation in total. Comparatively to other states around the country, I'd say it's somewhere in the median to upper median to other states. But with that being said, I kind of think it's important to look more at our neighboring states, you know, mainly Massachusetts, because that's what's ultimately going to drive economics and potentially take revenue away from the state. So the flower tax is on par with Massachusetts for the most part, but it's really tough to calculate because they have that THC potency tax thrown in there. So it's really hard to compare apples to apples. So the flower, I think, is pretty much on par on average, but tax on things like edibles and concentrates is going to be much higher compared to Massachusetts, unless you're talking about very low potency products. All right, so IRC section 280E, if you haven't already heard about this and you want to get into this space, you're definitely going to hear about it soon enough. Without getting into too much detail, this is a federal law that limits deductions and tax credits for those in the marijuana industry. And this is due to marijuana still being listed as a Schedule I drug. There's actually, I think a bill that was kind of put to the floor yesterday that, to start talks with that. And one of those things is descheduling it in that bill. This is way beyond the scope of, the webinar, but kind of not only choosing your licenses, tax planning and any of these structured choice go hand in hand altogether. And that's pretty much the federal side of things. Getting into New York State a little bit. Traditionally, New York State's been pretty generous as far as taxes go to agriculture and manufacturing. So we'll see if that, kind of stays on par for this. So the one of the first things with New York State tax is the conformity to 280E. So all those deductions that you're limited to federally, and you're going to be paying a higher marginal tax rate if you're in the cannabis business compared to other businesses. There was nothing in the bill that says that New York State is deconforming to that 280E. So currently you're not going to be able to deduct those things for New York State purposes either. The way the New York State law works for the most part is New York State automatically follows federal law unless they decouple from something. We saw that a lot with, some of the recent, tax law changes and stuff. But it wasn't, in the bill at all. So it might have just been overlooked or, maybe kicked down the road for the Cannabis Control Board to, bring up that issue.
Great. Well, thanks, Nick. A lot of information, right? Lots of regulations, but it's very exciting, right? Very exciting that we're having a new industry come here. There's an opportunity for us locally to grow here. And, thanks for having a local expert like yourself as well. Got great information. And, if you need, you have Nick's information right there, as well as with Center State as well. I know Nick put up what to do now. That's something that we can definitely help with. Nick, you mentioned that there's going to be fees for the licenses, right? And you're unsure of what there is. Any speculation of, what that amount could be? Is it 4 figures, right? Is it 10,000? Is it 6 figures there? Any speculation, any idea?
For registered organizations, I assume that those are going to be pretty steep, for these bigger operations, because part of those initial fees for those registered organizations is going to be used to fund the social equity, reduction of fees. But, as far as we really just don't have an idea. I would hope it's not, upwards of, the 250,000, 500,000 that we saw in the, initial medical license rounds. But at the same time, they were only giving out 10 medical licenses. So there's no way it's going to be that higher. Otherwise it might not go so well. So yeah. I would be guessing and throwing a dart at a board.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Well, we do have a question from Mike Golden.
Sure. Hey, thank you. I had I'll just start with one I won't be reading. Do you think that smoking will be permitted within consumption on site lounges?
Yes, I do. Yep. Yeah, and it's important to note too, currently, you can smoke, it goes along with, the smoking the tobacco too, in public places and whatnot. So right. You can smoke a cigarette, you can do that. So, if you can, smoke outside, in areas, I would be shocked if you couldn't smoke in these on-site consumption lounges. Yep.
Right. It's just that I know we can't smoke tobacco within any building within, New York State. So I kind of question that as I'm actually looking to open a lounge.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I would just be surprised. I just don't know if it would work very well if, you can only, say eat edibles, on site and things. Right. So,
especially in our winter months here. So.
Right.
Exactly. And Nick, just to follow up to that too, you mentioned that municipalities, they can opt out of retail and on-site consumption. So is that it? Only those two licenses that
Yes.
municipalities can opt out?
Yep.
Okay. And Mike, thank you for the question.
Thanks, Mike.
The next question we have is from, I have Justin.
All right. Hey guys, great seminar, good information. I own a significant amount of land. I got a 26-acre farm. Have they touched on the possibility, like, are they considering greenhouses to be an indoor operation, or would that be more like outdoor?
Yeah, we don't know for sure if they're going to allow outdoor right now. There's definitely a lot of, people like yourself, farm owners who currently grow hemp outdoor and things that are pushing to allow outdoor.
Yeah.
So no guarantee, but I know that that's definitely a point of interest of a lot of people, especially in upstate.
Would they consider a greenhouse? Would that be like an indoor grow operation?
Yeah, I would say probably my assumption would be a greenhouse would be indoor. There's definitely, I could foresee, if they do allow outdoor, there's definitely going to need to be some like security members, whether I don't know if that's, a fence or natural borders and things like that. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. All right, the next question we have is from Karina.
Great job pronouncing my name, Brian. Thank you.
Nice.
And Nick, great presentation. You have obviously a wealth of knowledge, so thank you for doing this. And I did jot down your email, so you can definitely expect me to be in touch. I just wanted to verify for the retail licenses, just to make sure my comprehension is correct, that so they're going to, you have an ability to have up to 3 licenses. And so does that mean that each retail location requires its own license?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that, I'd be surprised if they didn't have like some sort of expedited process. If you hold 1 license and you want to open up, a couple more.
Right.
But yes, that's how I understand it, is that each license for retail is going to be just 1 premise, so you would need actual separate licenses for each of the 3.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. And next we have Brian Campbell.
Hey there, Nick. I had a little clarification question about micro business license holders. Did you say that micro businesses will be able to sell it to other dispensaries?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So micro businesses can only sell their own products. So you can't sell any other products, but you can either do your own dispensing or sell it to people holding a retail dispensary license. That's correct.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Well, Brian also has a great name as well there. Nick, another question here. So, it kind of sounds like the state's talking out of both ends of their mouth with this one. And this is in terms of environmental impact, right? So they're unsure about the outdoor growing, which, requires 0 energy use, right, by the sun there. But also, I guess it's to Justin's question there, but we want to do indoor growing, right? So is there a reason for that?
Yeah, well, and that's, you hit one of the great, arguing points of allowing outdoors, exactly what you just said. There's a lot less, these indoor grow facilities soak up a ton of energy, have environmental impacts on their own. So that's definitely, people pushing for the outdoor grow. That's a big, point is, the law says that they're going to look at, environmental impacts in your application and then not allow outdoor grow. I think that would be, counterintuitive for sure. Mm-hmm.
Nick, we have another one in the chat. Are we aware of any local municipalities or towns that have opted out at this point?
Yes, it's very hard to track, but that ball has started to get rolling, where there's been a couple towns who have actually opted out. So that's actually interesting too, because I know, so it's different if you're a town municipality or a village municipality. So a village can opt out, but then automatically force a public vote in November. But a town board doesn't have the option to do that. A town board can only opt in or opt out. If they opt out, there's kind of a signature process where residents could force a vote. But yeah, you're definitely going to start seeing that in the news a lot over the summertime because, you know, there's a process that goes along with that too. So if a town is thinking about it and they're waiting till November or December, they're probably not going to get it done. So, you know, I think every day we start to see in the news a little bit more of either boards have taken a vote, you know, to do it or not do it and things. So that's probably going to pick up a lot of steam. I mean, just to name a few, like in the upstate, I know Casanova Village, they've opted out, but the town hasn't decided yet. This is around my area, so I'm paying a little bit more attention to it. The villages of Manlius, Fayetteville, and Manoa, they decided to, in the villages, to opt out, but then they're automatically going to have a vote in November. But the town hasn't made a decision, yes or no yet. That's just a note of few. That's a big thing down in Long Island too. I know that there's been a lot of talk down there because they have just so many, you know, districts and things down there. But,
And again, they can only opt out of retail and on-site consumption, but there's nothing preventing anyone from those towns to go to the next town or city over, right?
correct. Yep.
Okay.
And that's yeah. Yep.
All right, good. We have, let me see here. Does a dispensary need to be in a commercial building? So I guess that question's coming from, I guess, could you have your house be a dispensary, right?
I don't think there's any specific requirements on that yet. That'll definitely be cleared up in the regulations, but I would assume probably yes, it's probably going to need to be commercial. And the reason I say that too is because local governments, if they don't opt out, they are going to be able to set zoning restrictions themselves. So I would imagine a lot of towns are going to want that zoning to be in commercial places. So that could potentially be up to the local municipality. You know, I don't think that they're going to want, for the most part, people to be selling out of their homes, if I had to guess.
Right. Yep, absolutely. If a micro business does everything from start to finish, does it need to be under one roof, or can you have multiple businesses, multiple properties? Do we have that information yet?
I would say no, because we really don't know much about the size and scope. Yeah, I don't know. Also, if you're going to be able to, there was no language in the bill that said if you can have more than one location under a micro business license too, like with the cultivators. So I don't think we fully know the answer to that too, because we don't even know, you know, is it going to be, you can grow 2 acres? Is it 10 acres? Is it 100? We have no idea right now.
All right, great. And we have Justin again, who I'm going to take you off mute and you can ask your question.
All right. Well, say everything goes great. What do we have any, and you get a license, do we have any timeline where we're going to be able to actually like start growing? I mean, you know, say we have a greenhouse, we put plants in the ground. Is there any timeline yet when this is actually going to be able to kick off?
A lot of other farmers, I mean, right now they're still establishing the board. A lot of people would have hoped that the board is established right now, which is sort of delaying the process for the regulations and stuff. But the hope is, you know, you probably know as a farmer that, you know, you're going to have to plant, you know, May of next year in order to be able to have, you know, especially outdoor, to be able to have products to sell, you know, later next year.
Absolutely.
So
you'd have to know by like January.
Yep. So a lot of farmers I work with are saying we need to be licensed by May next year so we can put seeds in the ground for sure. Yeah. Okay. So that's hopeful, but no guarantees. You know, I mean, anything could delay the process and stuff, unfortunately. So there's some rumors that they're even though the board hasn't been established, that they're kind of working out the regulations in the background, behind closed doors, but that's just a rumor, no guarantee.
That would be
there.
awesome if they said, here,
Yep.
you
I
guys
think
can get your license.
Yeah, and I think New York State kind of understands that every day that goes by is that, that's just, they're not getting their tax revenue too. So I mean, there's definitely incentive for New York State politics to get things done, I would say.
Agreed. Thank you, guys.
Great. We're coming up on time, but we have a few more questions here. So next, I'm going to go to Nick Fretwell. Nick, floor is yours.
Hey, so I was wondering at what scale is considered a micro business?
I'm sorry, say that again.
At what scale is considered a micro business? Have they determined that?
We don't know that yet. Yeah, we don't know if there's gonna be like, a plant cap or acreage cap or anything. We don't know that. So I'd assume, that's definitely one of the licenses that are, targeted towards social equity things. So it's probably going to be more on the smaller scale.
Okay, and then also, will prior marijuana convictions or charges be considered evidence of bad moral character?
No, because that's actually something that gives you priority to in the application process, only if it's convictions, not just charges. So if you were actually convicted of something that, is also now like expunged, then that actually is, that might even help you in an application or anyone else. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And Mike, I was getting to your question next, but I'm going to unmute you and floor is yours.
I kind of had a two-part question, if you will. One is, where are we for like events now? Like if I had a gathering or anything, I also have a clothing line called The Higher Calling, which is the THC thing. But if I wanted to say, I know I can gift marijuana, if you will, if I want to say, hey, first 50 people, no purchase necessary, come to my table and you can try a wine I infused, or you can try a, some new marijuana that I have or what have. Is that permissible? Is that pushing gray lines? Or
it's definitely pushing gray lines, because there's nothing preventing you from gifting anything right now because it's legal, but also it's, they made it legal, but they also made it, illegal to,
I've heard of people marking up merchandise to do it and everything like that, which I think is probably really pushing gray areas. So I wouldn't do any funny business like that.
Oh yeah,
I'd keep my merchandise at the same price, but I mean, it is a ploy, I'd say, to get people where you are.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, that's definitely pushing the button, in my opinion. Oh, you're gonna sell a T-shirt and then for $200 and then gift some product to go along with it. That's definitely,
Also, like the loans for social equity applicants, I was asking, I'm assuming that's going to be through the state due to the regulations on banks from the feds.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
It's all going to be funded through the state, through the tax revenue and the licensing fees for, bigger operators and stuff. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all your info. This was great.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, great. We're a few minutes over. So Nick, thank you. Thank you for joining us and providing this information in terms of the regulations. And it's exciting though. It's exciting we have this opportunity to grow and all learn together as well there. So Nick, again, thank you for joining us here. And thank all of you for joining us. If there's any questions, again, feel free to reach out to Nick. Feel free to reach out to myself directly. And take a look at the Center State CEO webpage as well. We have so many resources there to help both new and established businesses, as well as many events coming up there. So thanks again, Nick, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for tuning in.